Ah, yes, you can kind of smell it in the air. It's that time of year again where media members sit in front of a camera and try to explain to you why one player deserves the MVP and the other one doesn't, as if like both of them aren't playing historically great. For those who are unaware, we are some 60 games into the regular season, about a month removed from the postseason, and the two players that have stood out in the MVP race are Shea and Jokic. Two players that are playing great at an all-time level and are so historic that if they didn't overlap with one another, they would easily walk away with this award. But because they both exist at the exact same time during the exact same season, I promise you it's going to be very, very toxic for the next handful of weeks. And I truly believe that it's going to get so bad that it's finally going to force the NBA community to get a little bit closer to what it truly means to be an MVP. And at first, I think a lot of people thought that this conversation was going to be a little bit easier with the back-to-back games that the Thunder and Nuggets matched up with one another over the past couple of days, but not so much. Neither one of these players really had overwhelmingly dominant performances over the other. Both played great. The team split the two games, and you kind of just leave both of these games where you started before they even began, and that is, this is going to be a very interesting MVP race because, like I stated before, it's really going to challenge what it means to be valuable, especially since both of these players have very credible arguments to why they should win the award, and that's really based off of how valuable you perceived floor raising versus ceiling raising. On one hand, you have the floor raiser in Nikola Jokic, where it has not been stated enough how dominant he has been so far this season. As I record this video, he is averaging a 29-point triple-double with 10.5 assists, 13 rebounds, alarmingly nearly 2 steals a game, and shooting splits that, quite frankly, do not make any sense whatsoever. 58% from the field, 43% from behind the arc, and 81% from the charity stripe, resulting into a true shooting percentage of 66.2. And if those numbers aren't impressive enough for you, which, you know, they should. I mean, he's literally averaging a 29-point triple-double on crazy shooting splits, but hey, that's just me. That's just me, dog. But hey, if you're still not impressed, to put those numbers into their proper context relative to the rest of the NBA, Jokic is 3rd in points per game, 3rd in rebounds per game, 2nd in assists per game, and 4th in steals per game. That's crazy. He is quite literally top 5 in 4 of the 5 major statistical categories, while again having ridiculous shooting splits. Also, the individual performances speak for themselves as well. He had a 37-point, 18 rebound, 15 assist game against the Dallas Mavericks. He had a 30-point, 14 assists, 11 rebound triple-double against the Miami Heat, where he only missed 2 shots the entire game. But of course, the game that everybody has been talking about recently is the 31-point, 21 rebound, 22 assist game that he had against the Phoenix Suns, where he didn't just put up ridiculous stats, he also shot amazing from the field and also proceeded to win that game against the Phoenix Suns. Some people were immediately clamoring about how this is one of the greatest games that they've ever seen in NBA history. I think that's a bit hyperbolic, especially since we've seen some of the Luka performances recently as well. But nevertheless, very, very impressive. But easily the most impressive feat, in my opinion, is Jokic's ability to consistently raise the floor of a Denver Nuggets team that has struggled pretty mightily throughout this season, especially early on. In the first 18 to 20 games of the season, when Jamal Murray was struggling, Aaron Gordon was not playing and missing time, and more importantly, a lot of the younger players were just not meeting expectations that the front office needed them to do so, Jokic stood firm in the underwhelming performances from a lot of his teammates and continued to produce at a very high level and kind of just rolled the ship a little bit, even though it got really rocky early on. And the numbers were ridiculous. He was averaging 31 points, 13.5 rebounds, 10 assists, nearly 2 steals, and shooting splits of 56, 50, and 80. Wowzers. But more importantly, as always, you can kind of just see the impact from Jokic with his on-off numbers. When Jokic was on the floor in those first 18 games, the Denver Nuggets had an offensive rating of 123, nearly 124, a defensive rating of 114, and a net rating of 9.4. But when he was off the floor, they plummeted to a minus 18.5 net rating. That's crazy. But that's kind of been the impact of who Jokic has been all season long. Even when Jamal Murray is playing better and Aaron Gordon is healthy and available, and they're getting better support from a lot of their role players, it's still been pretty consistent that if Jokic is not on the floor, if he's not playing at a certain level, that this team just isn't anywhere near close to a lot of their peers in a very tough Western Conference. And you can see that with the on-off numbers for the entire season. When Jokic is on the floor, the Nuggets have a net rating of near 11, but when he's off, it drops all the way to a minus 9.4. Now, to be transparent, when it comes to on-off numbers, you gotta do a little bit more digging, look at the lineup data, and so, to be fair, some of these numbers may be heavily influenced and skewed one way or another, but I think that this is a fair assessment on who Jokic has been, not just this season, but for most of his prime. And this is a clear indication of how valuable he is, especially because that's how a lot of people tend to define value. In the hypothetical argument that I grew up constantly having with a lot of people, that if you took X player off of Y team, how good would the team be if that player wasn't on the roster? Back in the day, that was a hypothetical question, but now, thanks to advanced analytics and just looking at on-off numbers, we have a much clearer indication that indeed, Jokic is one of the greatest floor raisers that the NBA has ever seen. And then when you add on top of the fact that he is also in conversations pretty clearly for a lot of people that he is the best player in the NBA, it's kind of cut and dry that he should win the award. However, I'm here to tell people that's not traditionally what the MVP award has been throughout most of its existence. And actually, it's valued ceiling raising way more, which is why a lot of people lean towards Shai. Now, to be clear, when it comes to traditional logic, I tend to stray away from it because there's a lot of flaws in what a lot of people used to believe or how they used to determine what value truly meant for a lot of these players. But when you get to this level of ceiling raising, when you get to this level of winning, when you get to this level of just dominance and how valuable Shai is to this team, it's pretty hard to deny what he's doing. So far this season, the 26-year-old is averaging 33 points, leading the NBA, giving you 5 rebounds, 6 assists, nearly 2 steals per game, and the shooting splits as a guard are just ridiculous. 52.5% from the field, 37% from behind the arc, and 90% from the charity stripe. It does not get talked about enough, the run that Shai is on right now. He's only 26 years old. It is a bit of a surprise for a lot of people, but not too much of a surprise because he's been doing this. But I have to say, who Shai has been this season has been very, very impressive. Also, Shai has the individual performances. Again, maybe not as crazy and eye-grabby as Jokic, but he leads the NBA with the most 40-point performance with 11 of them. He also has 4 50 balls as well. One of these performances, again, just happened a couple of games ago against the Denver Nuggets where he put up 40 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and the three-point shooting wasn't the greatest, but 47% from the field, still very impressive. Also, as of late, a lot of these high volume scoring performances have happened a little bit more recently, which has made his last 15 games even more impressive than what his season average is. In the last 15, he's averaging 34 points per game, nearly 7 assists, 5 rebounds, still a steal, and giving you 50, 43.5, and 90 shooting splits, a true shooting of 64. Very impressive, again, for a guard. But once more, the true value in who Shai has been this season has been ceiling rising. The fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder at this point of the season are on pace to win 65 to 67 games is pretty remarkable. And historically speaking, looking at how the MVP award is handed out, any team that goes on to win 65 games and has an all-time great performer as their best player tends to receive the award. As I record this video, the Thunder have a win percentage of 81.5, which is on pace to win 67 games. So I went back throughout NBA history to see how many of these teams that have won 67 games or more had an MVP recipient on their roster, and you wouldn't be surprised that it's pretty common for these teams to have someone on their roster win the MVP, especially if they're performing at an all-time level. Now, this season, you not only have 1 but 2 teams that are playing at this level, and Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, doesn't play at the level of Shai, so that makes sense. But we have Curry winning it in 2016 and 2015, Dirk winning it in 2007, Shaq winning it in 2000, Jordan winning it in 96 and 92, Bird winning it in 86, Dave Cowens winning it in 73, and Wilt Chamberlain winning it in 67. There's only a handful of times when a player who is playing at an all-time level leads their roster to this level of success and they are not awarded with the MVP, which is pretty consistent again throughout league history. Ceiling raising has always been perceived to be the most valuable aspect or valuable trait in determining who should or should not win the award. And then on top of the fact, a lot of the impact metrics also point to the fact that Shai is hyper impactful to this roster and what he provides to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And this is regardless of who's on the floor with him or not. Shout out to Carson out there with Nerd Sesh. He actually posted a very insightful tweet outlining how it doesn't matter who Shai is on the floor with. He's consistently posting lineups that are a plus 20 net rating. It doesn't matter if it's with Isaiah Hartenstein, J-Dub, or Chet, or 2 of the 3 are not in the lineup. It doesn't matter. It's still yielding all-time all-time results, which is very, very impressive, which, as crazy as this may sound, this honestly shouldn't take too many people by surprise. The Thunder are on pace to win 67 plus games, but Chet has only played like 20 games so far this season. J-Dub has slightly regressed as a shooter. Hartenstein and Caruso, the two big pickups throughout the offseason, they've missed time as well. And again, they're still on pace to be one of the best teams in NBA history. It's crazy. That's crazy. That's a level of ceiling raising that I did not think that Shai was going to be able to do this season. And so when you put all of that into its context, as well as the fact that the on-off numbers for Shai, though when he's off the floor, the team doesn't drop down to a negative, but they're still reaching highs of like plus 16, plus 18, again, depending on a lineup, maybe plus 20. All of these things point to the fact that we are just not seeing a level of dominance statistically that should immediately put him in the conversation to be an MVP recipient. And as a quick sidebar, because I see this way too often on the timeline, you have to have statistical dominance when you're in the MVP race, because I hear too many people saying, well, if it's just about wins, what about Donovan Mitchell, or last year with Jason Tatum, or a couple years before that with Devin Booker? Great players, really great seasons. None of them are doing statistically what we're seeing right now from Shai. And so when you put all of that into context, as well as the fact that his on-off numbers also point to the fact that it doesn't matter who he's on the floor with, it's plus 16, plus 18, plus 20, depending on the lineups, that's a level of ceiling raising that it's really hard to knock that value. Again, the floor raising isn't as high as Jokic, because when he's off the floor in many lineups, the Thunder are still a positive team. They're still basically a 500 ball club, whereas the Nuggets would probably go on to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. But it's really hard for me to shake the value of ceiling raising, which then kind of brings us to the original question, the question that a lot of people are going to be forced to answer by the end of the season is, what exactly do you value more? The historically traditional lens of how many people perceive what an MVP is tends to lean more with the ceiling raising, and especially when we see it at the historic level that we're seeing out of Shai in OKC this season. But I think a lot of people over the past handful of seasons have really started to value floor raising. We first saw it with Russell Westbrook a few years ago, and then Jokic kind of picked up on that over the past handful of seasons as well. And it's actually gotten so bad that you have players such as a Jason Tatum or a Devin Booker who are putting up really solid seasons, and yet they don't really get any true MVP considerations when you look at the ballot once everybody puts in their votes. And so there is a possibility that you could more so lean in that direction with Jokic. Also, quick sidebar, I would not be doing my due diligence if I did not highlight the fact that Jokic, it is significantly more difficult for him to win the MVP, not just because he's going up against an all-time great player having an all-time great season with all-time great winning, but he's also having to go up against history as well. What I mean by that is, when it comes to Jokic, and we kind of entered this territory a couple of years ago when he was on pace to win his third MVP in a row, and a lot of people just didn't feel comfortable giving someone without a championship 3 MVPs, so they kind of backed off on it and they gave Joel Embiid that award, even though Jokic should have won it. And so this year we're kind of heading back into that territory where Jokic is on pace now to win 4 MVPs in 5 seasons. And because a lot of people don't perceive Jokic as an all-time great status, and what I mean by that is like top 10 player of all time or top 15, a lot of people are just now at least entertaining the idea that he's a top 5 center of all time, which, you know, it is what it is. A lot of people still don't even believe that this is the greatest offensive player of all time. But, you know, nevertheless, since a lot of people don't perceive Jokic in that light, him trying to create history or at least break it is going to be very, very difficult for him to do. But just in a general sense, people are still always going to look back and say, well, you know, we didn't give it to LeBron, and we didn't give it to Jordan, we didn't give it to this player or that player, so why we got to give it to Jokic? And so that's a challenge in and of itself that he has to go up against, as well as going up against someone who's on pace to lead their team to like 67 plus wins, which rarely happens in NBA history. So yeah, there's that as well. More than likely, in my opinion, what's probably going to happen is that Shai is going to win the award, because I do believe there's still a lot of traditional media members voting for this award, as well as the fact that I just think that it's really hard to look away from someone winning 67 plus games in an NBA season, knowing the fact that Chet did not play but only 20 games so far this season. J-Dub regressed as a shooter. Hartenstein, Caruso missed games as well. Those are a lot of things going against Shai, and yet he still was able to lead this team to all-time great standards. And I think that cannot be stated enough. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know y'all's in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.